Okay, welcome back. We are going to do the second video accompanying 6.3 in OpenStax. The first video focused a little bit on the anatomical terminology associated with the bones, for example, epiphysis and metaphysis and diaphysis and some of the cell types. But there's a lot in this section, and I decided to break it into two videos so that you could take a little break between them. So in the second video here, what I would like to talk about is the structure, kind of the microscopic anatomical structure of compact bone and of spongy bone. And so we're going to begin with compact bone. And the compact bone is one of the, when you get a chance to look at these microscopically, you take a microscope, you take a section of bone and look at it. Compact bone is one of the easiest things for any student to recognize. And the bottom right-hand corner here is a micrograph of a section of compact bone. And you just see these really beautiful concentric cylinders that are all stacked upon one another and packed into this compact bone. These concentric cylindrical features are called Haversian systems, Haversin. I've actually heard them referred to as Haversian, but I think the pronunciation is Haversian. And Haversian systems or Haversian cylinders, also commonly referred to as an osteon, Osteon. So either one, they're interchangeable. Use any terminology, either of those terms that you want. Anyway, one of the just most iconic slides that you'll be able to see. Nobody ever misses it. And so I want to talk a little bit about what makes up these osteons or Haversian systems. And so let's go over here to the illustration, the cartoon. And I think you'll begin to understand a little bit. First of all, notice that this is the periosteum out here with both a fibrous layer and an osteogenic layer. We learned that earlier in our previous video. But here you see them nicely. Remember, this is dense, irregular connective tissue with fibroblasts. This is filled with lots of osteoblasts that are forming bone. And as they're laying down this calcium phosphorus kind of exoskeleton around themselves, secreting that, eventually they entrap themselves. And here you can see a lacuna with that osteoblast now trapped inside. And once it's trapped inside, we change the name. Instead of talking about an osteoblast, it now takes on the name osteocyte, and these osteocytes have the job of maintaining this important matrix that makes up the compact bone. So let's take a look here. Each osteon or Haversian system consists of a concentric layer of this bony matrix. And these concentric layers are called lamella. So concentric lamella. So notice this one has, for example, one lamella here, two lamellas, three lamella, four lamella, five lamella, so on. So this osteon has layer after layer after layer after layer of the bony matrix. So the lamella is the calcium bony matrix. These lacuna always exist between two lamella. So notice they're just on the border of one lamella and the beginning of the next, so always pinched in between. And the lacuna are just the spaces that are containing the osteocytes. So the osteocyte cell lives in that little pocket there called the lacuna. And then this is quite interesting. The lacuna are all attached to one another with these tiny little canals called canaliculi, 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 the tiny little canals that are basically just allowing the two lacuna and the osteocytes within them to share nutrients, and as a way of getting their waste products into the bloodstream to leave the bone. So the canaliculi connect the different lacuna to one another and also connect all of them to this central canal here called the Haversian canal. Now you might see it down here much better because the vessels within it have been obliterated when they produced the slide. So here you can see that canal. It's totally hollow, and this normally would have a blood vessel, it would have an artery and a vein and a lymphatic vessel and a nerve within each one of these Haversian canals. And you can see them all here. The yellow is the nerve, the blue is the vein, the red's the artery, and the green is the lymphatic vessel. Here they are labeled over here for you. So notice that each osteon or Haversian system has its own central canal, and each has all four of these running through it. Now, where are they coming from? Where are these vessels coming from? They're actually coming from outside the bone. You might imagine that. They're coming through what are called the nutrient arteries and veins, here referred to as periosteal artery and vein, that penetrate right into the core of the compact bone through what are called perforating canals. These are tiny little canals that let those blood vessels come in, also let nerves come in and lymphatic vessels come in. And you can see the perforating canals, connect all the various osteons. So this set of vessels is connected to this one, is connected to this one, and so on and so forth. So these are the general terms that refer to compact bone. Now, what I want to do next is I want to talk about spongy bone. And actually, before I go to the next picture, you can just see here is the beginning of spongy bone from the compact bone about it. So this could be, for example, the epiphysis, where the compact bone comes into contact with spongy bone. And that's not always the case, but that's what we have here. Okay, and so this spongy bone is going to, I'm going to see it in the next picture coming up, but notice that it's branched. So rather than these concentric cylinders that are all packed in tightly with one another, instead it branches off into these arms that are also formed in a very similar way. You're still going to see lacuna, you're still going to see that bony matrix, but they just don't have these concentric Haversian systems. So let's take a quick look. So this is a look at the spongy bone here within the metaphysis. Remember, this is the metaphysis here under the epiphyseal plate or epiphyseal line. So we're looking at that. These are called their trabeculae. These branches are referred to as trabeculae. And notice the branches have these still concentric kind of lamella within them, and so these are the lamella are these linings of the calcium-rich bony matrix. Notice the lacuna, just like you expected. They're lacuna with osteocytes in them. And notice that on the outside of these branches called trabeculae, you may find both osteoblasts, as you see here. These are all osteoblasts surrounding. And you might also find osteoclasts. So the spongy bone is particularly a place where you can have both resorption of the calcium carbonate matrix, the calcium phosphorus matrix, and also where you can find the building of new calcium carbonate, calcium phosphate with this osteoblast. So you find both of them. You might also find osteogenic cells in these areas. One last thing to notice is the canaliculi. They exist here too. Also connecting one lacuna to the next lacuna, and ultimately to a blood supply. All right. The final thing is just to quickly review blood supply, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I just wanted you to notice that the epiphyseal artery and vein penetrate into the epiphyseal part of the bone. There's also a metaphyseal part of artery and vein that support the metaphysis. And there's also a nutrient artery and vein that produce blood supply to the diaphysis of the bone. So each of the parts of the bone has its own blood supply. The epiphysis has its own, the metaphysis has its own, the diaphysis has its own. And again, not much. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but just notice that the blood supply comes from outside, has to penetrate right through the bone called the penetrating canals, and brings the bone its nutrients via blood. And so those are really important to recognize. Okay, that's it for 6.3.